The beam beneath my left boot is already starting to fail. I can feel it in my bones before I hear it. That slow, nauseating bend. The timber deciding whether it still wants to carry my weight, or whatever passes for thought inside would. My arms are stretched out wide, and I am pressing this notebook so hard against my ribs that they hurt. I keep telling myself, don't look down. Please don't look down. But I do. I keep staring down through the broken, jagged gaps where my floorboards used to be. I watch it work. And that is the thing. It is not panicked. It is methodical. God, it is so horribly methodical. It finds a board, slides a claw beneath the edge, pries it up, then moves on to the next one. Like it is taking apart a dresser it bought with its own money. That metal filing cabinet I dragged up those stairs, that absolute nightmare of a thing, had to weigh 200 pounds. It took me 20 minutes of sweating and bleeding just to shift it 1 inch. Now it is lying on its side in the dirt, swatted away with one effortless motion. The way you would brush a dead fly off a kitchen table. The shape of it, I still do not know what to call it. It is so huge that the ceiling suddenly felt like a suffocating little shoebox. Wide across the shoulders. So absurdly wide that my brain had stopped being able to make sense of it years ago. Even after 5 years of trying to understand it. Dark, drinking in the weak light, and the scraping sounds its claws make against the pine are not random. There's rhythm in them. A terrible kind of purpose. And outside. Anyway, I had to force myself to stop looking through the glass, because every time I glanced out at the pines, I saw them. Dozens of them. Standing there in the freezing night. Completely impossibly still. I do not think they had moved once since the moment I first noticed them. They were not slamming against the walls. They were just waiting, like a crowd gathering around a wrecked car when everyone already knows the ambulance is too late. Patient. Whatever part of their plan required speed was already finished. The joist groans again beneath my boot. It slips. I crush the notebook tighter against my chest. 5 years of my own messy cursive trapped inside those pages. 5 years of absolute delusion that I called research. I need to go back. Maybe if I force this into some kind of order, my mind will not break completely. Standing on a ceiling rafter in the Bitterroots at 3 in the morning, clinging to paper like it is body armor. If I do not lay this out clearly, then none of it means anything. And I need it to mean something, even if I am the only person who ever knows. Just for this. I have been out here since I was 34. I am 41 now. Honestly, I do not even know why age matters anymore. My cabin sits buried deep in the national forest. So far back that reaching the nearest dirt county road takes a 40-minute hike through thick timber. Much longer when the snow is deep. No cell service. The closest town with real groceries is 40 miles down Highway 93. I would take the truck out there maybe once a month. The rest of the time, I lived off a coughing generator, a rusted hand pump well, a heavy ironwood stove, a chest freezer packed with wrapped venison, and dozens of glass jars from the summer garden. People always assume that if you live like this, you must be running from the law or something. I was not. I just never needed the noise of other people to feel alive. Some people are built that way. I worked land surveying for a while, drifted around, and eventually saved enough money to buy a piece of dirt where the silence was thick enough to drown in. I was fine. I need that understood. Completely honestly fine. Alone for years. Then came the fall when I found Silas. It was late October. I had been clearing deadwood along the northeast property line. Up here, by 4 in the afternoon, the light turns this bruised, dead gray. I was dragging a huge section of pine toward the splitting stump when my boot nearly came down right on his chest. He was jammed between the roots of a massive Engelmann spruce, folded in on himself like his spine had forgotten how to function. A man maybe 40 years old, maybe older. It is hard to tell when someone looks like that. His flannel shirt was shredded. His cargo pants were soaked with mud. His left boot was missing. Dirt was packed beneath his fingernails. His lip was split open, and his side was torn wide, meat and blood mixing with the soil. I could not look at it for more than a few seconds. No backpack, no phone, no wallet, no identification at all, no water bottle, only a cheap folding pocket knife with the blade snapped off. But he was breathing. Wet, rattling breaths. I could have driven down to the highway. I could have flagged a state trooper and let trained people handle the bleeding. I thought about leaving him there. I truly did. But instead, I dragged him inside. Why? God, I have turned that question over until there is almost nothing left of it. Maybe years of isolation rot away your common sense. Maybe when you see another warm body bleeding out in front of you, some ancient animal instinct overrides the thinking part of your mind. I washed the mud from his wounds. I hauled him onto the spare cot. I buried him beneath wool blankets. I checked his pulse every hour until dawn. Eventually, he woke up. He whispered that his name was Silas Mercer. He said he had been hiking alone and lost his way. Vague. So unbelievably vague. But out here, you do not pry into a person's secrets. I respected the quiet. He was intensely polite. He ate every plate of food I set in front of him. He never complained. He spent hours sitting beside the frosted window, staring empty-eyed into the pines. 3 weeks passed. Then came the first full moon. I snapped awake around 2 a.m. The sound, I still do not know what to call it. Heavy, guttural, spilling out from Silas's room. Every alarm bell in my nervous system was screaming at me to hide. Pull the quilt over my head. Lock my door. Do not breathe. I walked out into the freezing hallway anyway. What I saw will stay burned into my eyes forever. Silas was twisting on the linoleum. His body was doing things bone and muscle were never meant to do. His knees snapped backward. His spine stretched longer. The mass of his flesh swelled and warped into something violently wrong. It lasted for minutes. Agonizing minutes. Filled with wet, cracking sounds I hear every time I close my eyes. When the transformation finally ended, the thing breathing hard in my guest room was not human. It was so enormous that the ceiling looked ready to collapse onto its skull. Over 7 feet tall. Thick fur covered its chest. Its shoulders were like boulders. The face. I just cannot describe the face. Its front limbs, or whatever that thing was using to walk, ended in heavy, brutal hooks. Excavator claws made for tearing. It looked into my eyes once. Only once. Then it turned its massive head away from me, like I was a lamp. Or a chair. I scrambled backward into my bedroom. I slammed the deadbolt. I shoved the oak dresser against the doorframe. Then I sat shaking on the floorboards until the sun broke over the ridge. The next morning, Silas was just Silas again. Sitting at my kitchen table. Drinking black coffee. Pale. Trembling slightly. He did not even blink when he explained it. He said it was a rare biological condition connected to lunar cycles. He said he had to isolate himself so nobody would get hurt. He admitted that it sounded completely insane. He was not begging me to believe the science. He was just calmly reciting the facts of his life. I sat there gripping my mug, remembering how that nightmare creature had dismissed me. A predator deciding I was not worth the calories. And then I made a choice. I told him he could stay. So this is what happened after that. I convinced myself I was being practical. I reinforced the basement. I hauled in bags of concrete. I poured thick layers over the stone. I mounted a heavy steel door and locked it down with 5 massive deadbolts. I drilled iron anchor rings straight into the foundation so Silas could chain himself to the floor. I put up a double-layered perimeter fence. I wired 12-volt car batteries directly into the inner mesh. I screwed motion sensors into the pine bark. I rigged halogen floodlights. Containment. That was the word I whispered to myself. Managing the crisis. But the truth is, I was building a monster laboratory in the woods. I filled spiral notebook after spiral notebook, writing down everything. His diet. His pulse. How long he slept. The mood swings that came before each full moon. I tracked seasonal changes. Recorded his memory blanks. Scribbled down data points like a lunatic. Cross-referenced his calorie intake. Logged the exact temperature in Fahrenheit. I thought I was the one holding the magnifying glass. I thought I was cutting through the veil of some biological miracle. I had no idea that someone else was doing the exact same thing to me. Because while I was playing scientist in the dirt, Detective Garrett Cole was drowning in cold cases 40 miles down the mountain. I only put this together much later. But Cole had spent 3 full years searching for missing hikers. Solo backpackers. Campers who signed the trailhead registers and then simply vanished. No blood. No shredded clothing. The trails did not go cold. They just stopped. Abruptly. Like those people had stepped off the edge of the world. Ranger Mara Ellison was the one finding the footprints. Huge craters driven deep into the mud near the creek beds. Impossibly wide. Impossibly heavy. Nothing native to that ecosystem left tracks like those. She had been making plaster casts of them for 2 years. Cole would drive his cruiser up there just to stare at them. They came snooping around my boundary lines at least 3 times. I would catch the flash of Mara's windshield from the high ridge, or see the sheriff's SUV crawling along the logging road. About a mile from my southern perimeter, my sensors would ping. I would panic, shove Silas into the concrete basement, lock the steel door. I told myself I was protecting a victim. I told myself the outside world would only shoot him. Honestly, I do not even know if I believed my own lies. Maybe I was just frozen, trapped inside the routine. But I was not stupid. By the 3rd year, the cracks in the dam started to seep. Small things, tiny details, the kind of microscopic glitches you desperately dismiss as coincidence. Because admitting there is a pattern means your life is over. That was when the deadbolts moved. In the 4th month of the 3rd year, I randomly decided I would start locking the basement myself. I did not give Silas a real reason. I only muttered something about upgrading the protocols. He did not even blink. He shrugged it off like my sudden paranoia was not interesting at all. So I took a black Sharpie and drew one tiny line straight across the iron bolt and the metal housing. If the lock turned even slightly, the line would break. Old surveyor habit. Trust nothing. Verify everything. 2 weeks later, the morning after a full moon, I checked the lock. The black ink had shifted. Only a fraction of an inch. A microscopic slip. The kind of thing you could blame on the foundation settling, or on your own shaking hands, if you were not already choking on terror. I just stood there in the doorway, staring at it. Silas dragged himself up the stairs, feet heavy, and mumbled good morning. I croaked it back. I fried eggs, drank coffee, kept my mouth completely shut, but I did not sleep for a week. And around that same time, Cole found the graveyard. 6 miles northeast of my cabin, tucked under a granite shelf, buried beneath woven spruce branches, there was an enormous stash of stolen property from the missing hikers. Cell phones, leather wallets, muddy boots, canvas backpacks, keys. But Cole did not just find a pile. He found a ledger. The belongings were carefully sorted. IDs stacked perfectly by state. Smartphones lined up by screen size. Fleece jackets folded into clean squares. Car keys arranged on a flat rock. Torn trail maps. Bears do not organize keychains. Wolves do not fold clothes. Something out there was keeping a filing system. I did not know about the dead hikers then. I was completely consumed by my own suffocating nightmare. And that was when it got worse. It was a Tuesday night, about 3 weeks after the deadbolt shifted. Silas was locked in the dark. I checked the Sharpa lines twice. I was lying in bed when I heard them. Footsteps outside the window, crushing the gravel, pacing around the walls in a huge, heavy circle. Just a slow, lazy, terrifying walk. I grabbed the sensor tablet. Blank green lights. Nothing had been triggered. I lay frozen under the quilt, listening as those massive feet made 3 full laps around my house. Unseen. Undetected. At sunrise, I almost ran to the eastern fence. The frost was crushed flat. Impossible craters punched deep into the dirt, for feet between each stride. And crouched there in the wet grass, I finally understood the horror of it. The tracks slipped perfectly through the narrowest slivers of the sensor cones, threading through the exact places where the invisible beams were weakest. The monster knew my security grid better than I did. I stumbled back into the kitchen. Silas was chewing toast, filling in a crossword with a pencil. And staring at him, I realized the only way the thing outside knew the blind spots was if the man inside had drawn it a map. I swallowed the panic. I waited until he went out to split firewood. Then I tore down 3 sensors in a frenzy. Added 2 more I had kept hidden in a plastic tub for a year. Spread them out. Changed the pitch. Shortened the laser paths. Swapped the battery housings. Wiped down the glass. I did not say a word to him. I told myself I was losing my mind. Paranoia. I kept repeating that word until I finally snapped and rigged the hidden camera. It was a cheap hunting camera. Ran on 4 AA batteries. I waited for Silas to take his long afternoon hike to burn off tension. Then I slipped into the concrete room. I wedged the lens tight behind the iron ventilation grate, completely hidden in the shadows. I barely slept. I just stared at the ceiling, sweating over what the digital card was going to show me. Every morning, I pulled the card out and fast-forwarded through the footage. At first, it was only the awful transformation. Bones snapping. Then hours of that hulking shadow sleeping. Pacing the floorboards. Staring blankly at the steel lock. Scratching its chin. Sniffing the cinder blocks. Then my brain finally woke up. I had not been checking the dead hours. The pitch-black stretch before dawn. Between 2 in the morning and 5. I dug out 3 months of archived footage. Skipped straight to the witching hour. God, I do not want to write this. I really do not. On the recording, the beast would lift its enormous weight off the floor and lumber straight to the east wall. 8 months earlier, I had pinned a large topographic county map there. The monster stood inches from the paper. Then it raised one claw. And it worked. It carved delicate, surgical lines into the map. Not tearing. Not thrashing. Drawing. I dumped the file onto my laptop and zoomed in until the pixels bled together. Faint, deliberate scratches. Precise arcs etched over the cell tower symbols. Perfect lines scored down dirt roads to track Mara's patrol schedule. County trail cameras marked with tiny directional arrows. Missing hiker sites circled. Dates tallied with intricate little runes. I think, honestly, I am almost certain. It was a kill count. It was a ledger. I sat frozen in my kitchen chair for hours. The iron stove had gone cold. Outside, the axe kept falling with that sickening thud. The exact same rhythm I had heard for 5 years. The black Sharpa marks. The blind spots in the grass. My pathetic spiral notebooks. My careful research into his diet. His sleep. His stress triggers. I had handed him the perfect blueprint to my own brain. I remembered sitting right there, listening to his sob story about lunar cycles. Choosing to swallow the whole lie, because playing savior made me feel in control. Then the chopping stopped. Boots stomped across the porch. The door scraped open. Silas knocked the mud from his heels. "Cold's moving in," he grumbled, tossing his coat onto the peg. "Probably want to stack 1 or 2 cords before the weekend." "Yeah," I choked out. He turned toward the sink. Ran the water. Started humming this terrible flat little tune. And as I stared at the back of his flannel shirt, my blood turned to ice. He knew I had seen the tape. I do not know how I knew. But the air in that room died completely. I locked myself in my bedroom, clutching my notebook, desperately searching for the exact moment when the lie swallowed the truth. I did not find it. I found the real answer the next afternoon, down in the dark. I waited until he left for his 90-minute walk. Gave him 15 minutes. Then I crept down the concrete stairs. Honestly, I did not even know what I was looking for. I only knew the basement was the heart of the infection. I had reinforced that basement myself. If the rot was anywhere, it was down there. I swept my flashlight over the cold walls. Slapped the stone. Found nothing. I checked the anchor rings. Searched the chain tub. Studied the steel door. Poked at the ventilation pipe. Prodded the concrete blocks. I almost gave up. Then the beam caught a shadow line. A seam far back in the corner of the floor. Invisible unless the light hit it at exactly the right angle. Maybe 8 feet long. A perfect rectangle cut into the slab. I found the release pin 1 minute later. A 6-inch steel rod disguised as a rusted plumbing stub. I pulled it. The floor opened. Smooth. Silent. The hinges were swimming in fresh grease. Someone had been maintaining it. I shined the light down into the hole. There was a dry shelf, maybe 2 feet deep, lined with plywood. And lying on the wood. God, I do not want to say this. It sounds like something from a cheap comic book. Forms. Human shapes. 5 or 6 of them pressed flat. Arms. Legs. A torso. A neck. A perfect face. Not rotting. Just empty in a completely sickening way. Like shed snake skins. I reached down, my hands shaking so violently the flashlight jumped everywhere. I grabbed one by the shoulder anyway. It weighed only a few ounces. The texture. I am not doing that. I cannot describe it. The face had a jaw. A nose. Cheeks. Lips. Empty dimples where the eyes should have been. A hollow shell. I dropped it. Stumbled backward. Hit the cold wall. And my mind snapped violently into focus. All of it. The entire 5-year performance turned inside out. Silas was not a man cursed to become a monster. The transformation, the bones cracking, the skin splitting, the agony I had charted for half a decade. That was him taking the human suit off. The beast was the baseline, the original, the stable state, the quiet man drinking black coffee, chewing on a pencil, doing the Sunday crossword, complaining about frost, talking about windshield wiper blades. That was the puppet, a meat suit built for moving through daylight. They do not turn into monsters. They wear us, and when the hunt is finished, they unzip the skin and fold it away in a dry box. The things in that hole were not trophies. They were a closet, and Silas had spent 5 years learning my operating system, letting me document his fake biology, answering my stupid questions, eating my canned food, splitting my pine logs, sitting on my porch. He was not adapting to my world. He was reverse engineering me, my speech patterns, my mannerisms, the exact way I slump at the table, my reaction times, the particular way I breathe when I am afraid, watching me wire the fences, smiling at my reinforced steel. I thought I was the master, but this notebook crushing my ribs, 5 years of ink. It is only an instruction manual for stealing my life. I slammed the hatch shut, dragged in air, forced myself to function because time was bleeding out. I surged up the wooden stairs, snatched my notebook from the table, grabbed the heavy metal truck keys, burst out the front door. Silas was standing on the porch, just staring at me. The polite, exhausted hiker act was gone, completely wiped away. A slab of meat that had forgotten it was supposed to be pretending. 3 agonizing seconds passed. Then I bolted through the side door, sprinted for the truck, yanked the keys out. My vision was swimming. I reached the driver's door and froze. Both rear tires were flat, sunk into the gravel, not slashed. The valves had been unscrewed. Professional. 1.5 hours. That was how much of a head start he had to destroy my exit. I dropped the keys in the mud, spun around, ran for the eastern pines. I had a trail cut back there, 2 miles of heavy brush before it emptied onto a logging road. If I could reach that dirt, I could survive. I made it exactly 100 yards. Then I hit the wall. They were waiting in the trees. Huge, ink-black shapes wedged between the spruce trunks. Completely still. I knew what they were from their size alone. From that suffocating stillness. I whipped around. More of them blocked the west. The south. Deep in the shadows, a noose of muscle was tightening. The cabin was the only option left. The only walls. I ran back. Animal panic took control. I shoved the steel utility cabinet to the bottom of the stairs. Useless. But my hands needed to push something. I scrambled to the second floor. Yanked the attic cord. Kicked the ladder down. Pulled myself up into the fiberglass. Kicked the hatch shut. 5 minutes passed. The front door groaned open. The steel cabinet exploded into the drywall with a boom that rattled my teeth. Then the careful dismantling of my house began. Honestly, why so slow? Efficiency? Torture? Maybe peeling the house apart was just mechanical. Or maybe it wanted me to sweat through the absolute 0% chance of escape. Floorboards vanished beneath me. Snipped. Popped. Thrown aside. Splintered. Erased. It was pulling the spine out of my house. I am edging across the bare joists now, arms spread wide, clutching this stupid pad of paper. These beams are rotting, bending under my boots, and down through the fresh cracks, the shadow is peeling the floor away. I glanced at the gable window. Tiny. I knew the dimensions were a joke. I glanced at the hatch. A death trap would snap beneath my right heel. I dropped hard, flung one arm up, caught a crossbeam, swung wildly in the dust. The notebook slipped. I smashed it against my sternum. All my brilliant little theories tucked inside. Data points, lunar calendars, diet charts, sleep patterns, 5 years of genius-level science. Except it was never about the monster. It was about me, my flaws, my blind spots, my arrogant, suicidal belief that I was the smartest thing in the woods. My left foot broke through. A splintering crack. My left side plunged. I threw myself sideways, clawed at the rafters, kicked at nothing. I dangled over the drop, hanging there sweating, one hand on raw wood, one hand crushing paper. Below me, the demolition stopped. It stared straight up at me. And then I thought about the coffee. That first morning coffee. Sitting across from a monster in flannel. Listening to him spin a fairy tale. Choosing to believe the lie. Ignoring every screaming alarm. Not because of evidence. Because the lie made me feel powerful. I chose the lie. Every fence post I dug. Every lock I twisted. Every motion sensor. Every car battery. Every yard of heavy chain. All of it came from that one fatal desire to be the good guy. The rafter split. I fell. I do not even know how to finish writing this. My hand keeps cramping. Before I hit the ground, before the lights went all the way out, I heard it. Not a roar. A voice drifting up through the dust. My voice. My exact rhythm. My register. The hesitation before a vowel. The pitch in my throat. The specific way I trail off when I am nervous. 2 words. Welcome home. He had digested 5 years of my personality. My speech patterns. My mannerisms. The exact way I slouched at a table. My laugh. Building the perfect skin suit. That was the real project. The topographic map. The deadbolts. The stolen gear. The long mornings at the table. The polite small talk. I do not know where they dragged me. It is pitch black here. I still have the notebook. Maybe it is useless to them now. Or maybe it is a joke. I am writing this as fast as I can, all in one sitting, because the shadow on the wall is getting longer. There is a gas station 30 miles west on Highway 93. A Circle K. I bought black coffee there on Tuesdays. The girl behind the counter knows my face. She always asks about the weather. If I walk through those glass doors tomorrow, what will she see? Will it be me? Honestly, I am not even sure I am really awake. Maybe I bled out on the floorboards, and this is only my dying brain lying to me. But I keep seeing those empty shells in the basement. Stacked. Waiting for their turn. And I keep hearing my own voice saying hello. Not stumbling. Effortless. Like it had been practicing in a mirror for half a decade. If someone unearths this book, believe the ink. Whatever is walking around the Bitterroot property right now, it is not me. I do not know what Detective Cole found when he finally kicked in my door. But I know the thing wearing my face had memorized his schedule. And I know it has had a very, very long time to practice sounding exactly like a friend.